Well, hello, it's Kesha. Welcome and welcome back. So we are going to start our new series on Prosperity's 10 Commandments. I think that's a better visual of it. Prosperity's 10 Commandments by Georgiana Tree West. Let's just go ahead and center down, close our eyes, take a deep breath in, and release. On the next inhale, pick up all the busyness of the day, and release. Pick up any busyness or not busyness, any discomfort in the body or, confusion of the mind, paying attention to things that don't serve us. Just pick all that up in the breath and release. And see a column of white light coming down around you. And with each breath, you're feeling the light quicken each cell of the body, igniting the divine spark within, seeing your own flame grow and grow, seeing your vision clear, your heart expand. And in the space of peace and wisdom, love and understanding, let's go ahead and open our eyes. All right. So I think I've had this book for quite a while, and maybe I've skimmed it. I don't think I've read it all the way through. A good way for me to tell that is to notice that there's a scant bit of underlining and writing in the margins, but only like a couple of pages. Yeah, so I didn't get very far. So luckily we'll get to do this one together, kind of like that. So the reason this book looks like this is because it had a proper, jacket, but this was a used copy for me, and I didn't like the look of the jacket, so I cut it up, and the inside flap I taped to the inside of the book. So I thought I'd just read that to you to get an idea of what we're going to be looking at. Prosperity's 10 Commandments by Georgiana Tree West. The 10 Commandments form a true foundation for permanent prosperity as well as for right spiritual and moral conduct, according to Georgiana Tree West in her book Prosperity's 10 Commandments. Mrs. West devotes a chapter of her book to each of the commandments, adapting them to the subject of prosperity. For example, the first commandment, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," is paraphrased from a prosperity viewpoint by Mrs. Tree West as follows: "Thou shalt look to no other source but God for thy supply." Then she explains that since man's life is derived from and dependent upon God, man can and must look only to God for supply. This explanation is supplemented with the author's suggestion of steps to take in impressing one's whole being with this realization. The 9 other commandments are adapted by Mrs. West just as carefully as the first one. Letting go, tithing, speaking the word, and giving and receiving are some of the laws of prosperity treated by Mrs. West. Prosperity's 10 Commandments inspires its readers with a zest to be up and doing, to put the truth into action by following the down-to-earth suggestions for claiming order and prosperity in one's affairs. I am particularly excited about this in my own journey just because I have been trying to manifest something that is fairly large and outside of myself, at least for the moment. And I've been encouraged over the last week, I guess, since we finished the Lenten series, to do a reading for myself with any one of my tarot decks. And I put it off for several days and finally got to it last night. And one of the questions I asked was, where am I in the process of manifesting this thing that's, I'm interested in? And the gist of what I got was that I needed to just go back and focus on spirit. So I'm particularly excited about this new series because this is my opportunity to refocus on spirit. And what I was seeing in my reading, and I think what happens to many of us who maybe begin the process of manifesting but then don't see it come to fruition, or at least it takes longer than we expect, not that everything isn't under divine timing, it's that I was looking for the thing to show up and noting that it wasn't there instead of continually having my focus on God. So I know that God is the source of my supply. That's not a question. But I gotten so wrapped up in the manifestation coming that I hadn't gone back to source. So this is a great way to refocus. And I'm curious that at the end of however many days it takes us to read this, if my manifestation comes because I've now refocused my attention back on God. Because, right, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. We cannot serve God and Mammon. We have to focus our attention on one thing. So yeah, I'm excited. And so let us just begin. I think, we'll probably just read a couple of pages. I like that she'll have some practical steps to do. We'll consider that our homework if I don't come up with something else, based on spirit while we're reading this. So let us just begin. Chapter 1, the first commandment. Thou shalt look to no other source but God for thy supply, based on thou shalt have no other gods before me. Pilate's question, what is truth, is the cry of every man's soul at some period of his existence. Even as Jesus stood silently before Pilate as the revealed answer, so the Christ in every man silently awaits recognition as the truth of his being. Truth is the state in which spirit dwells, a state of perfection which is eternally creatively active. Truth may be briefly defined as the action of spirit. As such, it is unlimited in nature and cannot be confined within the restrictions of time and space. In other words, truth, once voiced, is true under any circumstances for all eternity. When Moses delivered the 10 Commandments to the children of Israel, he voiced the truth God had revealed to him concerning the relationship of God to his Creator and to his fellows. The 10 Commandments, in the form in which Moses gave them, served as a basis of right action toward God and man for the unruly, primitive people that he led out of Egyptian bondage. Each commandment is an embodiment of truth. Therefore, the form can be changed to meet the needs of all men at all times under all conditions. Truth is capable of limitless expansion. For this reason, we find the essential truth embodied in the 10 Commandments is not only the basis of right spiritual and moral conduct, but also the basis for establishing permanent prosperity. This is what we are after. The first commandment is the very foundation of Christianity. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. We are to acknowledge no other source of life, love, wisdom, and power save our Creator, by whatever name you choose to call it. Only this secure foundation can bring man into manifestation, his spiritual perfection. In this same commandment, we find the only sound basis for the manifesting of permanent prosperity. It is prosperity's first commandment. Thou shalt look to no other source but God for thy supply. Our scriptures fairly teem with exhortations to look to God as the one source of supply. Both the Old and the New Testament are filled with promises of rich fulfillment of every need for those who acknowledge his presence and power. David, the shepherd king, voiced the confidence of humanity in a Creator who is both able and willing to provide for his creation when he said, "My soul, wait thou in silence for God only, for my expectation is from him." Man has always looked to deity for his heart's desires. In many primitive forms of worship, he indulged in wild orgies to attract the attention of deity to himself. Even today, tribal medicine men don weird adornment, make raucous noises, and go through frantic gyrations in order to win the favors they crave. They know these antics attract the attention of men, so it seems logical to their simple minds that they should make an impression on deity. I'm going to stop there for just a moment, because there's a little bit of tone in the way that she writes that, and not that I excuse it, because I'm not her and cannot make excuses. But I do think we need to remember that she is writing in, when was this published? 1944. And so the perception of others outside of self is definitely considered the other. And so for her to use things like weird adornment, or to express it or describe it as raucous noises and frantic gyrations, those choice of words have a sense of judgment about them. I'm going to ask that as we read, we don't take on that judgment. We just recognize that she's trying to point out that they're acting differently than what we might expect. Another primitive idea was that of buying the favor of deity through making gifts and sacrifices. So sacrifice played an important part in many of the earlier forms of religious worship. Since human life was held the most precious gifts of all, it too was offered to deity in propitiation to ensure God and to ensure good crops, good hunting, and victory over enemies. The Hebrews were among the first to introduce the idea that human conduct has something to do with gaining the favor of deity. They saw deity as a mighty king, a stern but righteous judge. They conceived the idea that prosperity, health, happiness, and protection were rewards for good conduct meted out by their God, the ruler of heaven and earth. They still saw deity as a power outside his universe, demanding obedience and worship. But all through the Old Testament, there are evidences of growing understanding of the relationship between God and man. This understanding was a necessary preparation for the revelation of Jesus, that God dwells in us and already provided for every need and awaits only our expression of trust in him and our acceptance of his bountiful blessings to deliver them into our life. That's a pretty important concept. So I'm going to go back and reread that. The relationship between God and man. This understanding was a necessary preparation for the revelation of Jesus, that God dwells in us and already provided for every need and awaits only our expression of trust in him and our acceptance of his bountiful blessings to deliver them into our life. So recognizing God as source and trusting that as God is nearer than hands and feet and cares for our every need, that our blessings will be delivered to us. As we trust in that, then it is evidenced in our manifestation. Both the Old and the New Testament are filled with promises of God revealed through spiritually illumined minds. There is the promise in the book of Job, "Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Thereby shall great good come unto thee, and thou shalt have plenty of silver." Again, in Deuteronomy, we have the promise, "Thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth." Notice that it says he giveth, not that he giveth the wealth, but he giveth the power to get wealth. And that power comes in the form of ideas and promptings and, the guidance that we get to maybe go to a certain place when we meet somebody and we talk about our issue, and, by that contact, there's manifestation made. The divine ideas which flow to us that we must, grab hold of from the ethers and act on as we receive them, especially when we've asked for greater prosperity. To ignore whatever the next piece of guidance you get is, even if it seems unrelated, is the way to not manifest, right? You can't ask for manifestation and then ignore whatever guidance you get, because by that guidance is your path to realizing your manifestation, right? So, and in the Psalms, we find, "Thou openest thy hand and satisfieth the desire of every living thing." All the promises are summed up in Jesus' statement, "Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." I think that's probably a good place to start for now. Those are some pretty strong ideas to meditate on, and they set the foundation for the discussion we're going to continue to have as we read through the book. So I encourage you to maybe, meditate on these ideas. The first one being the commandment itself. "Thou shalt look to no other source but God for thy supply," right? And then meditate also, I would recommend, on the idea that as we recognize God and trust in his power and love for us, that is the beginning of manifestation. I think that's a pretty good start. We'll see you back here. Today's Monday, so I think we're going to do these Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'll see you back on Wednesday. Bye.